I didn't know where the week went. And so I'm asking about what happened, and they're confirming this conversion, this amazing conversion in Asia, and this unbelievable recovery, and how the doctors didn't know, and they're explaining all of this stuff. And later I would put together what I was seeing with what was happening in the physical world, because I peered into the next realm, into a spiritual realm. And this is something that I don't talk that often about. It's, when you do something like this, when you see something like this, you want to say, oh, I saw Jesus, it was awesome, we hung out, it's a beautiful place. That is not always what happens.
Ladies and gentlemen, what happens when a Christian psychiatrist wants to marry a Richard Dawkins brand atheist, but he knows he cannot marry her if he's going to stay true to Jesus? Well, you won't believe the incredible journey that Garrett and Aja Halweg took to become a married couple sitting before us today. Their story, get this, it involves a trip to the emergency room because of Garrett's multi-system organ failure. It involves 17 doctors misdiagnosing the cause. It involves Garrett being in a coma and friends and relatives flying in to say goodbye. It involves Aja trying to make it to his bedside, but feeling peace after prayer from a stranger. And it also involves the right diagnosis coming from a very unlikely source. It turns out that there were monsters inside of Garrett. We'll explain as we go. Aja also then trying to correct the doctors to give Garrett the right treatment. It involves a bedside baptism with Garrett still in a coma. And then when he woke up, well, we're going to tell you the story. Garrett and Aja are here. They're going to tell us the story of God's undeniable providence in their lives right here on the I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist podcast. And by the way, the story will include apologetics, evidence for the faith. So here they are, all the way from Honolulu, Hawaii, Garrett and Aja Halweg. And Garrett right now is a psychiatrist on Honolulu, and the one who runs the practice is his wife. Yes, they did get married, Aja. We just met like a month ago when we were in Hawaii to do the Unshaken conference, and it was a joy meeting you guys. You guys kind of helped bring this Unshaken to Hawaii, didn't you, Aja?
Yeah, it's true. We are pals with Elisa Childers, and she has a heart for Hawaii. So when you guys started your Unshaken adventure, we knew that we wanted to see if we could get you guys out here, especially with her heart for Hawaii. And so we attempted to make it happen, found a lot of dead ends, but God made it happen. You guys got to come out and speak to a lot of people the truths that they needed to hear.
Well, God has been involved, I know, providentially in your lives. But let's start at the beginning. Garrett, let me start with you. First of all, how were you brought up? Were you a Christian being as a child? And what kind of relationship do you have with the Lord?
First, let me back up one step, because I really want to thank you for your ministry and the job that you do. I was first introduced to you through your book, I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. I started that late one night around a campfire. I read all night, reread parts of it, wanted to talk to anyone who would listen. Mostly it was my mom. I was simultaneously excited that I had never related to God in this way or known him through apologetics. But then I was also felt a little bit angered or resentful that I hadn't been introduced to this earlier, which I think all of your listeners can appreciate. And so, this is the story of how the blood of Christ heals and transforms lives. It's the story of God working through miracles today. It's the story of how the spiritual realm intersects with the physical world. and I think that's why so many people want to hear the story, is that they read the Bible and they say, is this book true? Can I depend on the promises in this book? And are they going to deliver? I mean, these are big promises. No more tears, resurrected body, incorruptible bodies, And we're here to encourage you and let you know there is a real place, heaven and hell. And if you put your trust all your days in God's plan, you will be saved. And if you don't, you're going to be working on your own plan. And so I was raised Lutheran during the 30 years following leaving there in high school. The good theology left the building and the world came in, and it turned very antinomian, as many denominational churches have done. But that was how I was raised.
Well, did it go to, when you say antinomian, did it go to a different moral standard then? Did they begin to say that certain things were right and true, like LGBTQ issues that we see in many denominations now?
That's absolutely correct. So I engaged in a 2-year email exchange with the senior pastor, and we had a conversation. I wanted to be very careful. This was a family. This is a family that I still love. I still love the people there. But so I wanted to engage with the pastor, make sure, not take it lightly. Through an exchange of information back and forth, he said that the people's interpretation, his congregation's interpretation of the Bible, is the final word and not the word of God. And it is at this point, this was after my illness. And I said, I love you, but this is not a joke. You are shepherding these people, and this is a false gospel. If the things that you're saying are not sin, then there is no need for Jesus to come. There was no reason for him to die. Now, I'm including myself in this story, and I'm sure we'll get into that, because I had people who loved me enough to rebuke me and convict me of my sexual sin. So, it's a beautiful thing when the church is actually living and working and breathing and repenting, and you're being convicted under that fellowship and under that ecclesia, that brotherhood.
Yeah, love doesn't mean approval, as we said many times on this show, ladies and gentlemen. It means seeking what's best for the other person according to God's will, not our own. And you need to speak out when people are being misled rather than led properly. And so early on, you were in a church. Did you consider yourself a Christian as an early adult when you went into med school, Garrett? Or like, when did you really say, I'm following Jesus? When did that happen?
Yeah, so I had the traditional upbringing of the infant baptism, of the first communion, of confirmation. But, in confirmation, when I think back about it, you make a confession of Christ. When I think back on it, I wasn't taking that seriously. I was discipled by some mentors in medical school who brought me up in the faith. And I wanted Jesus as a savior. In certain aspects, I didn't want him to be king. And I had to be rebuked to learn that he is, in fact, my savior, my king, and my Lord.
A lot of people do. We want the kingdom without the king, right?
Yeah.
So we want to be king. Can't we be king? Now, Aja, you had a different kind of upbringing. What was your upbringing like? And then what prompted you to go to the London School of Economics?
Yeah, vastly different upbringing. So between my upbringing familially and public school, I definitely believed that Darwinian evolutionary theory and science were the only answer and left absolutely no space for religion of any kind. And so I now sort of jokingly say I was a spiritual atheist, because anytime something bad happened, anything traumatic, my mom was diagnosed with cancer when I was 20 years old. When those big events happened, I would pray to God. I would even use the words God, with this desire for an external intervention, but without relationship, without rules, without accountability. And so I would say that my walk, especially at the time that I met Garrett, was one of total ambivalence. I just was willfully ignorant to all the ideas of the world. I didn't want to know the answers or even question the big questions. I truly didn't know and didn't care. And now, as a Christian, I realize and understand that those are actually some of the hardest people to reach, the I don't know and I don't care group, because they truly mean it when they say, I don't know and I don't care. And there's not much to work with when you've got that situation. So, spiritual atheism, heavy dose of the science, and not believing that religion could be anything other than a man-made way to control the masses.
And your dad was into Richard Dawkins quite a bit. Is that true?
Dawkins and Ehrman, and there was, quite a bit of that, which I didn't read because I wasn't interested. I didn't want any of it.
Right. So you go to the London School of Economics.
Yeah.
When do you meet Garrett, and where do you meet?
Friends of friends in my very small hometown. So we met when I was a baby, just 22 years old. And Garrett made it very clear that he was a Christian from early on, which was a red flag, because, I had been raised that religion was, in fact, all of our family friends at school, religion was just kind of the crazy people were the religious ones. And so I also had this very loving, accepting mother. So I was raised with that. So when I did meet Garrett, I had this is fantastic for you. I support you in your desire to follow this Jesus person, but certainly don't share it with me. I have no interest. So that went on for years. The London School of Economics came when I moved to London for a year when I was 26. And that was just a follow-up to my undergraduate degree in communications, and then wound up getting a degree from LSE in media communications and development of third world countries.
All right. So you guys meet. You're on different spiritual paths. You are both interested, though, in getting married. But Garrett, you said, I'm sorry, I can't marry you because
you're not a Christian. And her defense was, hey, we have many friends who are interfaith, and it doesn't matter. It's not a big deal. I don't know why you're being so obstinate. And I said, well, the definition of marriage is different to someone who is a Christian, the author and inventor of marriage, the sustainer of marriage. We're going to need God at the center of this to get us through. And there was no reference point for that. So I had tried to engage her in conversations about Christianity, or just even the metaphysical questions of life. And many times, probably scores, maybe hundreds. I don't know. How many would you say?
A lot.
Lot. Because we had an undeniable connection.
Yeah.
And we wanted it to work. So we were struggling and working really hard to know that something was there. Probably 2/3 of our relationship was long distance. But we just kept working at it. I kept trying to engage her, and I thought she would come around eventually.
Now Aja would go to church with you, but Aja, when you'd go to church, what did you think of church?
Oh my gosh. if I would go to church with Garrett, which was not super infrequent because the times that we did live together and we weren't long distance, I was open to going to church with him on Sunday for support of my boyfriend. But I would leave almost every time with this strengthening in my resolve to never be a Christian. I would hear what that pastor would say. I would experience lovely, kind people, but I would hear what he would say, which is, in my mind, you are a wretched, undeserving sinner. That's all I would hear. And my response was, but I'm a good person, better than most. And so what you're saying is just super offensive to me. And then if you talk about heaven and hell, talk about offensive. But now I know heaven and hell should be offensive. It is very offensive. And you should feel some sort of bristling at the thought of hell. But yeah, I always walked out of that church thinking, this is exactly why you won't find me becoming a Christian.
All right. So you guys then take a trip to Hawaii. What is the background with Hawaii? Did you guys grow up there at any point, or like, why did you go to Honolulu?
We both loved Hawaii. She had traveled there. I had traveled there. We were celebrating her birthday and decided that morning to go out to the falls, a place called Monowilly Falls. There was a rock jump that we wanted to hike up to and try out. So that's why we were in Hawaii.
But you're living in California as a psychiatrist at this point.
That's
correct. You have spent 10 years as a psychiatrist within the California prison system, right?
That's right. California Departments of Corrections and Rehabilitation.
So you're dealing with some bad dudes.
Level 4 inmates, and you would get extra pay if you took death row and you took call on death row, overnight watch. So I was paying off my medical school debt. So I would just take whatever they gave me, and it put me in really interesting places that I'm thankful for those experiences.
Now, where were you at the time, Aja, when he's doing the death row kind of psychiatry? Where are you living? Are you close to him or not?
So when he was, one of the prison systems that he worked in was in my little tiny hometown. So that's how we met, was in that area of Northern California, friends of friends. So went to a concert together one night, and he asked me out on a date. We went on a date the following night, and I told my mom that I had found the person that I was going to marry.
What did you think at the time after the first date, Garrett? Were you thinking the same?
Yes, definitely. I thought that before the first date. I mean, we were just kind of enamored, and there was depth. One thing that initially attracted me to her is that she was off pursuing her young 20s in San Diego when her mom was diagnosed with cancer, and she packed up everything, ditched everything, and came back and started caring for her mother. I met her when I found out about this and was able to go over and meet her mother, see her devotion in caring for her. It was immediately attractive, and I just knew the person that she was.
Wow. So you go to this trip to Hawaii. You come back to California. You're back working in California. What happens?
I pretty immediately flew from, we were living together in Southern California. My dad had a massive heart attack, so I flew up to Northern California to be with my dad. And within a couple of days of my arrival, Garrett told me that he was sick. So he said he had the flu. He is one of the healthiest people I know, doesn't get sick, just is a workhorse. At this point, he was working 7 days a week, just never ill, Energizer bunny. So he tells me he has the flu. And it progressively kept getting worse and worse. And he's telling me the symptoms that he has when we would be on the phone together. And he's saying, I have a migraine headache. I have diarrhea. I'm nauseous. I'm having shortness of breath. And I'm saying, I'm no doctor, but those symptoms don't typically go together. So you should go to the doctor. And he's like, no, it's fine. This was the beginning of the week. If I don't feel better by Friday, I will go to the ER. And so every day I spoke to him, he was sounding far worse and adding some new obscure symptom of what was happening. Brown urine. I can't remember if you had said that you were noticing that your skin was even turning yellow, but he's telling me all these things and I'm saying, good glory, get yourself to the hospital. This is not normal. Again, it's fine. I'll go on Friday if I'm not feeling better. So Wednesday night of that week, I spoke with him on the phone and he said, I'm too sick. I'm unable to speak right now. I just need to go to sleep. But as he's telling me this, he's truly panting into the phone. And I cried that night. I said, there's something very wrong. You need to get yourself to the ER. No, I just need sleep. So he goes to sleep and I'll let him pick up the story there.
Yeah. So when I was talking with her on the phone, I had recognized that the work of breathing was unrecoverable. So just from the effort it takes to breathe, and I treated enough people in the ICU, put enough people on, intubated enough people, put enough people on ventilators to know that I was in deep weeds and needed to get some help. So what I thought was, I'll get in the car, drive to Hoag Hospital. They have valet. I just need to get the story out to the emergency room if I can just get enough energy. So I walked down to my car, drove over, pulled up the car, walked in. They knew me in the community, so they rushed me back. They brought in the doctor right away. I told him the story. I said, I've been swimming in the backwaters in Hawaii. He turned to his scribe. He said, that's important. Make sure you note that. And he said, does anyone know you're here? And I said, no. He said, you need to let them know you're in a bad spot and you got to let them know. So I got out my cell phone. I'm trying to text a message that I find out doesn't get sent, but later the nurse uses my thumb to get into the phone and sends it for me. But yeah, I went out and then I awoke. The next awareness that I had was our family friend who was praying over praying over me because my parents weren't able to get there. They had just gotten the text that nurse had sent through.
And they were about a 90-minute drive north of where we were living at the time.
So she called her friend, who's her prayer warrior, and she dropped everything, came right over. They were right in the neighborhood of the hospital, and she started praying over me. And then I went out again. Next thing I came to, I was asking to give my parents medical power of attorney to make medical decisions. And they said, you're at 100% oxygen, 15 PEEP, you're desatting, we're going to intubate. And I thought, this is bad. I'm probably going to die. I'm not going to survive this. So I, was looking at my parents thinking, they're going to watch their son die.
Now, Aja, you have a father who just had a heart attack. You're how far away?
So I was a 2-hour flight and a 2-hour drive to the closest airport. So early that morning, he had gone late Wednesday night, Thursday, super early. His mom and I received a text from him that said, in the ER, they're going to be putting me in the ICU, but I'll be fine. is what it says.
Didn't he say something like multi-system organ failure?
Yeah,
but I'll be fine.
Not yet. So I immediately got on the phone and I'm calling Hope Hospital and saying, my boyfriend, Garrett Halweg, is there. Please tell me what's going on with his health. And they said, I'm sorry, did you say you were his girlfriend? We can't tell you anything. You mean nothing to us. We will be giving you no information. So even when Garrett's mom called, they said, yes, he's here. Yes, he's really sick. We don't have a clue what it is. Well, a few minutes later, we get a follow-up text because, of course, I'm shooting back texts. Garrett's, what is going on? Why are you getting put in the ICU? And his response was multi-system organ failure. That's it. That's the last text I received from him before he was in a coma on life support.
Now, is your dad in the hospital too, where you are?
My dad had been released from the hospital. I was home with him, caring for him, and he had had a massive heart attack that killed like a third of his heart. So he was in really bad shape, but home. And so I was scrambling to figure out how to get to Southern California, find somebody to be able to care for my dad, because all the reports that I was getting about Garrett's health in Southern California was that he was on this really fast, unexplainable decline.
Well, you're not going to believe what happened next, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to be back in just a minute. But before we complete the amazing story of Garrett and Aja, I got to tell you that we are going, Lord willing, unless the war escalates, we are going to Israel in October. We're starting in Jordan. We're going to Israel. Then we're going to go to Egypt on an extension. It's the first couple of weeks of October. If you want to join us, we only take one bus. It's a small group. We, of course, are going to have the great Eli Shukran, the archaeologist who discovered the Pool of Siloam and excavated most of the city of David, as our guide in Israel. You're not going to want to miss the trip. Go to crossexamine.org, click on events. You will see the 2025 Israel Jordan trip with an extension to Egypt. We'll spend 4 extra days in Egypt with our great guide, Mito Dito. We just were there in December. What a wonderful trip. Hope to see you guys there, but you better sign up soon. We're running out of room. We only take about 50 people because we want to keep it to one bus. It gets there's too many people when you get more. You want to have an intimate group. So check that out there. Also want to mention CIA, Cross-Examine Instructor Academy, this summer in Charlotte, North Carolina, July 31st to August 2nd. I'll be there along with Greg Kokel, Natasha Crane, Elisa Childers. We'll have Brett Kunkel, we'll have Alan Parr, we'll have Jorge Gill, several others will be your instructors as well. Go to crossexamine.org, click on events, you will see it there. All right, let me go back to this amazing story of God's providence. We're talking to Garrett and Aja Halweg. They now live in Honolulu. Hey, before we complete this thought, Garrett, I know there's a lot of people thinking you wouldn't marry Aja. Yeah. Because she wasn't a Christian, yet you thought it was okay to live with her. Can you explain that?
I'm glad you asked that.
How did that come down?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. So when I initially met her, she had given up all her worldly life possessions, to help her mom out with her cancer. Mm-hmm. I had met a bunch of her friends and family, and they said, wow, she's really not doing well because she's just taking care of her mom all the time. And what she could really just use is a break. And she wasn't working. She didn't have any, she didn't have 2 cents to her name. And at the time I was making good money. And, I said, hey, if you ever want a respite, I work all the time down in Southern California. I have an empty home. You can just relax and read and walk on the beach. And, I was, offering a respite at first. Mm-hmm. She took me up on it. After a couple of times of coming, I was going back and forth from Southern California to Northern California, working back and forth. And so when she took me up on it, of course, I was I'm close with my family, and we went up and spent some time with them. And my mom said, "How long are you visiting for?" And she was starting the questions like, "What's going on here? Like, why are you?" And she jokingly said, "I don't know, forever." and that I was involved in a different conversation, but I was eavesdropping on her conversation with my mom because I knew that was a very important conversation. And when I heard that, I didn't know what to think. And, like any Israelite going in and getting the attention of any Chaldean, you quickly absorb their gods, right? I mean, that is, we just recently did a generational, Aja and I were working on a study with a generational curse and all these things and what that meant. But there's no excuse. I clearly didn't have a boundary that would allow for a proper relationship without physical intimacy. And that was my sin. And and there's no getting around it other than repentance. And it's part of the miraculous part of this, because God orchestrated horrific illness to get my attention, to capture my attention, to say, "Listen, I am in control. I set what is good and what is evil, and I will allow anything for my children to get their attention and to become obedient to my will." And so,
well, if you're just tuning in and you're catching the middle of this is Dr. Garrett and Aja Halweg. Dr. Garrett is a psychiatrist in Honolulu. And in the first half of this program, we talked about how they met, and we kind of left the end of the last section there with you in the hospital with multi-system organ failure. Aja is up with her father, at least 4 hours away. The doctors are saying, "We don't know what this thing is, but you're about to be incubated," or that's not the right. What do you call it? What is it called?
They were intubated.
Intubated, not incubated, not a baby.
Support.
Yeah, you're put on life support. Okay. Yeah. And so what happens next? First of all, what are the doctors? You got 17 doctors trying to figure out what's going on. What do they say it is?
They had no idea. They didn't have a clue what was going on. I was just getting reports from his family that he was getting worse rapidly. So I sorted things in Northern California, drove the 2 hours to the airport, purchased a flight while I was there, and at the airport found out that he had declined enough to have to be put on life support. So at the hospital, I was just inconsolable, crying, very upset. And that's where my story really sort of begins, as far as coming to know Jesus Christ, because there was another young girl at the airport, total stranger to me, who came to me and said, "Are you all right?" And I was blubbering and said, "No, I'm not all right. My boyfriend is dying in the hospital." And she said, "May I pray for you?" And I said, "Yeah, of course." I'd prayed plenty of times with Garrett, meant absolutely nothing to me. So she laid hands on my shoulders and she began to pray. And it was, I don't remember the words, to be quite frank, about what she even prayed about. But what I do know is that I experienced this incredible peace during her prayer. And I'll never forget, when she was done praying, I immediately thought to myself, that was weird. I wonder why that would happen. Oh, it had to be emotional duress. I'm just hyper emotional. That's why something like that would happen. And then got on the plane, flew to Southern California to find Garrett in a really, really bad spot.
What did the doctors tell you? that
They
it was?
said they had no idea. So they had tested for everything they were capable of testing for, and he was coming up negative for all of the tests they were running. They had put him on just a gamut of different antibiotics in an attempt to treat whatever it was, but they basically were saying, we don't know what this is. We don't know how to stop the course of deterioration. And at this rate, he will be dead very soon. The words they used were grave. His situation is grave. And so anybody that would want to say goodbye to him, now's the time, because we're not able to slow this down.
Garrett, were you in any way conscious at this point, or were you in a coma?
Nope, I had to be told all about this. That was so they rushed because I was known in the community. They got everybody down there looking at it, and it was a record. They said for Hogue, 17 medical experts in one night that came and consulted on the case, and nobody came up with the diagnosis.
What was the turning point, Aja?
Of his health?
Yeah.
So that's interesting. That's where the beautiful miracle, the beautiful work of Jesus comes in. So as these people were coming to say goodbye, they kept being in individual prayer, group prayer. There were people that were coming from local, people that were driving many hours, people that were flying in to say goodbye because the doctors were making it very clear that the chances of survival were slim to none. So I kept experiencing this prayer. And every time I would be involved in this prayer, I was experiencing that peace that surpasses all understanding. And truly every time thinking, I'm losing it. I'm off my rocker. Nothing explains this except for emotional duress. That's why this is happening. Well,
wait, can I just interrupt you? Because she later explained that my parents set up a Holy Spirit dance party in the hospital lobby, which just evokes such an awesome mental image for me. I'm just trying to understand what that was like, but anyway.
Yeah, it was just lots of people that love the Lord coming together to lift Garrett up for healing, for miraculous healing, because for all intents and purposes, he was dead. Because as the days went on, the more life-saving measures they were having to use. So first he was intubated, then they couldn't even give him enough oxygen with a machine breathing for him. So then he was put in a bed called a rotoprone bed that you can think of like a pig on a spit. Mm-hmm. That's truly what it does with your body so that your lungs can, because he had bled into his lungs. That was one of the many symptoms he was having. So there was so much blood and fluid in his lungs, he would need to be turned in order to get that oxygenation happening. His kidneys failed. He was on dialysis. They didn't think he had, or they weren't sure if he had brain function. He was beginning to have many heart attacks. Literally everything was shutting down. And so on the fourth day, and I am a question asker. So every single medical professional that came in probably took one look, because I never left the hospital. They probably took one look at me and said, oh no, here we go again. Because I would say, what's the prognosis? Is he going to survive? What does he have? And it was always, I don't know. We're trying, and grave. He's worsening, not getting better. So day 4, I'm out in the lobby. Garrett's parents are in the ICU speaking with a physician in there. And I get a text from a friend, from one of our mutual friends, and it says, I apologize if I'm overstepping any boundaries, but we just thought we should tell you. A few weeks ago, we were watching a show with our kids, and there was a story about a guy who had gone to Hawaii, swam in one of the waterfalls, and got this bacterial infection called leptospirosis. We just thought you should know. So I immediately had this feeling of, okay, what is this? Opened up the phone, went to the CDC website. He was literally textbook for the worst case scenario of leptospirosis. And so I just, along with seeing that this is what he had, I also had this overwhelming knowledge that I was being given this supernatural gift from God of knowing what way more than 17 medical professionals at this point hadn't been able to figure out. So, like a movie, I ran down the hallway to get to the ICU, got inside where his parents were speaking with an oncologist, and I said, I've got it. I know what Garrett has. Garrett has leptospirosis. And I'll never forget, she took one look at it. She said, all bacterial infections look the same. I don't think he has that. What I think he has is leukemia. And if he survives the next couple of days, he'll be dead within the next 6 weeks. And I said, no, this is what Garrett has. Tell someone. Do whatever it is that you need to do, but this is what Garrett has. Because I knew. Because God had given me the knowledge through somebody else, albeit. But I knew that this was a gift to me. And that's when the pieces of the puzzle with all of the piece that surpasses understanding, all of those things that I kept trying to pass off as being crazy, all of a sudden I knew that the Lord was actually reaching his hand out to me and saying, please, please listen to me, giving me more grace and mercy than I ever deserved.
Garrett, why do you think none of those 17 professionals thought about where you had been? Because you had mentioned that when you walked into the ER. Why was that not pursued?
Because God shows the wise they are foolish. Mike Figueroa was the one given the diagnosis. He has no medical training. He was my tow-in surfing partner. He's probably the best jet ski jockey that you could tow behind.
Wait. Is this the guy that was in prison?
No.
That's another guy.
He's the California tow-in surfing partner.
Oh, okay.
Ben Cordero is my Hawaii.
Hi, Ben.
Yeah, hi, Ben.
This is kind of an inside thing because Garrett was showing me how to surf when we were in Hawaii. And I was asking Garrett, have you ever gone to the North Shore and done those big waves? And he had, and he was being towed by a guy on a jet ski to get him on the wave. And you said this guy had been in prison.
That's correct.
So this is a different guy now, different jet ski guy.
And he has a miraculous story, which I was able to share with you out in the waves. You know, I have the honor and privilege of teaching the great Frank Turek how to surf. It's awesome. Such an honor. Now, when you're off at some, college with some skeptic that's just being toxic, you have the ultimate retort. You can say, yeah, but do you surf?
Yeah, come on, man.
They're like, no. And you're like, well, stand down. I do. I've surfed.
That's right. I've tried. I've been showed by the great Garrett Halweg showed me how to surf on Waikiki. I don't know how you guys do that because there's rocks everywhere. I'm going, Garrett, look at the rocks. Oh, you just got to avoid them. Yeah, I know, but
he's being humble. For your listeners, he did awesome. He surfed, he smashed it, he charged like a rhino right out here. It was awesome.
Yeah, to show you how hard this is, their 3-year-old son Luke surfs, okay? 3 years old. Anyway.
Well, you might not have an appreciation for this, but Frank is in great shape. Actually, when I saw you, I was like, oh, okay, this is going to be easy. We can get you surfing, no problem. So
yeah, I'll tell you though, it's a lot of muscles you don't hardly ever use surfing. I mean, I was like, we were out there for like an hour. I'm going, man. Of course, I have this condition known as 63, so that's a problem too. But anyway, let's get back to it. So these guys never even thought to think there may be a parasite, a bacteria that you got. We were at those falls. My wife and I went there. And there's a sign that says, don't go in the water.
Yeah.
Okay, so then what happened next? When did they finally say, well, we might as well, we got nothing else to lose? What happened?
Yeah, that day they said, okay, we'll run a test for this. If you're in Hawaii and you report that you've swam in the waterfalls and you're ill, they immediately test for it. If you've traveled here on vacation and you're back on the mainland and you say, I've swam in the waterfalls in Hawaii, they say, okay, interesting information. And it's not something that they test for. Maybe that's changed in the last 11 years, but 12 years, however long it's been. But they certainly at that time, it was so far off their radar. So at that point, she did in fact share with them this thought of leptospirosis. And they did run, of all of the antibiotics that they were treating him with, the one and only antibiotic that they weren't using was the one used for leptospirosis. So later that night, they hung an ampicillin drip. They kept all of the rest of the antibiotics going because they believed it was something different.
Yeah.
But they finally hung for that one. And a little tiny backstory, Garrett's father used to always ask me throughout, because at this point in our history, we had been dating 5.5 years of this, let's get married. I can't, you're not a Christian. Why are we together? Well, we love each other. So maybe that's enough for now. But we were really coming kind of to an end. And so throughout this 5.5 years, Garrett's dad would say to me, are you ready to get baptized? And I would laugh and scoff and say, no, and I never will be. Why he would choose to ask me this question at the hospital, God knows. But he at the hospital said to me, would you like to get baptized? In all seriousness. And I said, yes. And he said, oh, okay, let's work on this right now. Let's make this happen. Well, one of the people that had been hanging out at the hospital for all of these days up to this point was his Lutheran pastor from childhood. And so I then, on the 5th day, because this was the 5th day of Garrett being in the hospital, I was baptized at his bedside. So as we spoke about before, he was in that roto-prone bed, and they weren't able, they would have to open it up to work on him to clean up the bodily fluids that were leaking from everywhere. But they'd have to do it really quickly because he would desaturate so quickly when they would try to keep him on his back that they'd have to get him going again. So when we got the approval of a bunch of us being in there for my sprinkle baptism, and they said, okay, the nurse, who was lovely, she said, we'll try to open up this roto-prone bed so that you can hold his hand while the baptism is taking place. And it was the first time that Garrett was able to remain on his back without desaturating. And is that the right word? Desaturating?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he immediately from that moment started to have this miraculous turnaround in his health.
So you are in a coma when she's baptized. How long after that did you wake up, and what happened then?
So that was day 5. I came out of the coma on day 7, was extubated and came out on day 7. But I had a brief, some brief time on day 6. And do you want to tell that?
Yeah. So as soon as he had regained, I did it even on day 6 because they brought him out of his medically induced coma. And I said, hello, just so you know, while you were away, I was baptized. Would you like to get married? And he couldn't speak because he was intubated, but he cried and said yes. But then they attempted to extubate him that day, but his health was not well enough yet. So they kind of let him go back under again. The following day, they were able to successfully extubate and bring him completely out of the coma. So then I reminded him, I was baptized. I don't know if you remember, but I was baptized. Would you like to get married? And his response was,
yes.
But why now? Why would you be baptized now? And so I had to explain to him about the overwhelming peace that surpasses all understanding that I experienced with prayer, that began with the stranger at the airport. And then my experience culminated in getting that text message from a friend saying, maybe check this out, and knowing that that was God.
Garrett, do you remember the first time you woke up and she asked you that question on day 6 or no?
I do. I do. And I remember uh, family members later that were confirming the events. You'd have no knowledge. I thought it was uh, the just after I had seen my parents. I thought I would just took a little cat nap there, 15 minutes, and what I was seeing, you have no sense of time. What I was seeing was unbelievable, but the the family members were telling me about the events, and her, I'm finding this is 7 days later, and I didn't know where the week went, and so I'm asking about what happened, and they're confirming this conversion, this amazing conversion in Asia, and this uh, unbelievable recovery, and how the doctors didn't know, and they're explaining all of this stuff. And later, I would put together what I was seeing with what was happening in the physical world, because I peered into the next realm, into a spiritual realm. And this is something that I don't talk that often about. It's, when you do something like this, when you see something like this, you want to say, oh, I saw Jesus. It was awesome. We hung out. It's a beautiful place. That is not always what happens. And the things that I saw, I didn't really want to talk about. I had nightmares. In fact, they couldn't even get me to sleep in the hospital for the nights following, because I kept having nightmares about some of the things that I had seen. But much later, I actually met with two professors, Clint Arnold and Doug Hayward from Biola University and Talbot School of Theology Seminary. They teach demonology there, and they were very helpful in debriefing and processing. And they asked very insightful questions like, was the place that you contracted the illness ever used for any pagan sacrificial ritual practices or anything like this? Well, much later, I looked into it and I found out that Monowilly Falls is such a place it's favored by the elite chiefs and associated with stories and chants about gods dating all the way back to 1100 AD. And the area contains temples and sacred sites, sacred stones, archaeological features that and for the Hawaiians, there's deep ritualistic meaning behind falls, behind waterfalls. They're inhabited by spirits, for these ancient ritual pagan practices. But the place that I was at, when that's where I contracted, Monowilly Falls is where I contracted the illness. But the place that I went when I was out, of course, there is no time there. It's a very different place. It's hyper realistic, and it's very different from dreams or effects of anesthesia or anything. So it can be easily differentiated experientially from either of those phenomenon. But one example of a heightened sensory, I lost my sense of smell in 2006, so about 7 years prior to this happening, but I could smell perfectly in this realm, in the spiritual realm. And so there's a place in Luke 16 that Jesus talks about. He gives a parable about Lazarus and the rich man.
Mm-hmm.
And he talks about this place called torments and paradise, which is separated by a great chasm, the great divide, which cannot be crossed over by either paradise or torments. And from best I can understand, I was at the bottom of this great chasm. Now, I can't be sure. There's no signs telling you where you are, but I can also say, in this realm, there's no need to talk. You just project or cast your thoughts. People can cast their thoughts. So there's ultimate transparency. After this experience, I have no problem with Balaam's donkey who talks because, God doesn't need vocal cords. And so what I saw in the Great Divide, I think, was there was one feature was there was this enormous chain that extends to seemingly beyond infinity. It's strewn with demons that have half-torn torsos. Is this the chain that's mentioned in Revelation 20, verse 1, that Satan is bound with eventually? I don't know. I have no idea. What I can tell you is that in the bottom of this place, there is blood seeping into the ground, into the dirt. And where this blood is coming from, I don't know. I can't tell you. Is this the blood of martyrs or saints? I don't know. But I, did later reflect about Genesis 4:10 and Abel's blood crying out from the dirt, as well as Revelation 16, that the blood spilled is up to the bridle of the horse. But I was so I encountered fallen spiritual beings, and they told me that the fuel running the engine of this place is this blood. And it's interesting because much later, someone who is a student of anthropology and ancient literature, and he, after my recovery, he knew that I had this experience and was just pressing me. He's a secular guy, he's an atheist, but he was pressing me on what I saw because he's on a quest for truth. He just wants to know what's out there. And so he pushed me on a lot of the details about these fallen spiritual beings, and I'm telling him about them, and he's asking me more questions. He pulls out his phone and he turns it around and shows me a picture. And he said, "Is this it?" And I said, "That's exactly it. Where'd you get that photo?" And he said, "Well, this is a rendering from antiquity. It's a spiritual being that's known to show up when life is in the balance to humans, and they come back and describe this being. It's called succubus." And it was the first time that I had heard of it. He goes on to tell me, "Oh yeah, this has been recorded with different names throughout human history. Ishtar to the Assyrians, or Inanna to the Babylonian Sumerians, or Ereshkigal, even further in Mesopotamia, going all the way back to 3000 BC, which was surprising, shocking to me. But to relate this to what was happening back on the physical world with Aja and her baptism, her conversion, way, way above the Great Divide, was waging a spiritual battle of heavenly beings. And now, to be clear, I wasn't the focus of that battle. That battle was far beyond the opening of the Great Divide. And it was just absolute mayhem. But this battle, I've come to try to understand spiritual warfare, and what I understand spiritual warfare to be is the battle over our will of our mind, to be aligned with God's will. And one of the substantiating evidence or experiential evidence that I have in this is that I could call down these spiritual beings to help me with rebuffing these demon spiritual beings who were trying to indoctrinate me into dark lies, really, of Satan. And there was a momentary rebuff, but only a small reprise. And then they would go right back at it. They would work in concert with one another. And again, they just project or broadcast these thoughts, these ideas. And so, what were they trying to convince me of? Abandon the idea that anyone loves you. Others want something. They only want something from you. This is the way of the spiritual realm works. You are kidding yourself on earth if you think your family, your friends, your girlfriend, or anyone actually cares about you.
The accuser, right? That's what Satan is, the accuser. And
name that in Job 1. That's right.
When you came home, or when you came to the second time on day 7, did you immediately recognize this had happened? Did you think about it? I mean, you said you couldn't go back to sleep because it was on your mind.
Oh, yeah.
Did you tell Aja about it, or what did you do?
He did not tell me about it. So he would just stare at the clock. There was a clock in front of his bed. And I thought that maybe he had lost brain function, because all he did was sit wide-eyed and stare at the clock. He wouldn't sleep. Hours would go by. I would wake up in the night, look at him to check on him, and he's still just staring at the clock. And
could you talk to him?
Yes.
So he was responding.
He was responding, but...
Well, so let me jump in, because I could write. The first time that I came to awareness, I asked for a pen. So this is day 6. The first time that I came to awareness, I asked for a pen and a piece of paper. And I wrote I's and O's and handed it to the nurse. And she
wanted to know his ins and outs.
I needed to know my status of how bad I was, because I didn't want to actually go back. But keep going, yeah.
Yeah, so when I asked him, why won't you sleep? Why are you just staring at the clock? He didn't give me any reason beyond he was afraid to go back to sleep. And so I didn't understand at that point why he was afraid to go back to sleep. But that was the response that I was given at the time.
Yeah.
And how long after that did you tell her or anybody else about this, Garrett?
So there was I don't remember. I think I was still in the hospital, and there was some kind of account started on some social media. And in thinking it through and thinking of the love and the mercy and the grace of God, then I wanted people to know, and I wrote up the text, and she looked at it and she said, "Are you sure you want to?" Because it was basically like, I've stopped dreaming about the demons, and she's like, "Just so that you know, this sounds crazy. You might not want to text this to." She's like, "There's a lot of people receiving this every day. We're giving updates, and there's a lot of people receiving this. This is probably not a good look for the first, time that they're hearing directly from you." And I said, "Yeah, send it. It's the truth. And it doesn't matter. I'm not earning these people's favor. I just care about God's favor."
We just had Lee Strobel on the program. He's got a new book, Seeing the Supernatural, and there's a section in there about death visions. And there's also a section on near-death experiences. Now, you had some kind of near-death experience because you came back. Of course, the death visions, people don't come back, but they explain what's happening as it's happening. And some of them are negative, just like some of the NDEs are negative. And
Correct.
You think, if I'm hearing you right, that this, whatever you saw, was a war over Aja's soul. Is that right?
I think that is one of the explanations, and that was kind of the conclusion of these professors who teach demonology, spiritual warfare, from Viola Talbot. They kind of helped me process what was going on and the events that were happening in the physical world, and how to relate the two, how to understand and make sense of the two. And of course, the Calvinists and the Arminians always want to say, well, if you died then, would you have been saved? And, the fact of the matter is, Louis de Molina makes sufficient reparation of sovereignty and free will.
Yes.
In that I didn't die. God orchestrated the circumstances such that it doesn't matter what would have happened if I would have died. I didn't. And the fact of the matter is, I'm so grateful to God that I have this moment, and that I can share the love of Christ and his love for everyone. It's, the cross is an open invitation. It's the most inclusive invitation ever offered to humanity. So how you can say, this is, an exclusive religion, it's an exclusive faith, it's an inclusive invitation, right? So, our next breath isn't guaranteed, but I'm going to appreciate and be thankful for each one that he gives me.
Oh, absolutely. Now, Aja, when they gave him that initial antibiotic, but you insisted, just do it, just try it. How soon after that did they go, he's improving?
At that time, pretty quickly, because he also had, so day 4 was when I told them, the night of day 4 was when they hung the medication. Day 5 was bedside baptism and miraculous, where he had been on this really rapid, steady decline, and they kept doing all of the additional life-saving measures. Then baptism and this steady increase of him getting well from that point on. So it was day 4, and then day 5 was when...
Tell him about the prognosis, because that's...
Oh, yeah. So when he was in the hospital, they said they would have a social worker come, and the social worker said, here's the situation. Survival unlikely, but if he does survive, here's what we're expecting. We're expecting 3 months in intensive care, 1 month in intensive care, 3 months in the hospital, a minimum of 1 year of pulmonary rehab, because his lungs have been so damaged throughout this, before he could even consider going back to work, if he's well enough at that point, because we don't even know what the ramifications of what his body has been through. He lost 27 pounds in 11 days. When we left the hospital, I was only 10 pounds lighter than him. He was this emaciated, he looked like a zombie. The whites of his eyes were solid red. His skin was yellow as a banana. He had a giant open wound on his face from an opportunistic infection he got while at the hospital that they couldn't close, so it just had to remain open. You can't get much worse.
Actually, looking. I have a good story about that. So,
is it with the baby carriage story?
Yes.
Tell that story, because you told it to me at Waikiki that day.
That's right. So we lived in this place called the Doctor's Dorm. So a lot of our neighbors were doctors and older retired people. A lovely place called the Flower Streets in Corona del Mar. And I had a good friend who was a pediatric rheumatologist. And my job was to eat and exercise, which at that time was walking. And so my job was to eat and walk and try to get better, rest, eat and walk. And so that's all I did. Well, I'm on a walk during one morning, and Andy's walking towards me, and he's a doctor and has seen some awful things. And as he gets close, he's like, "Hey, I haven't seen you in a long." and he passes out with the bassinet. He's pushing the bassinet. The bassinet starts rolling down this hill. I run over and grab the bassinet, and now I pull it over to him, and I'm standing over him and trying to like pull him up, and he's looking up at me like, Garrett, you look awful. He's like, don't worry, it's just vasovagal. It's just, you look so bad, I passed out. And he's lying there. So finally, he gets himself together. He's like, I just got to sit here for a minute, and I can't really look at you right now, but I'll be fine. And so he gets up and he's like, what happened?
No, he didn't know that you were in the hospital or any of that?
No. He said, you look like death. You look like
you still had the open wound on your face?
Open wound. There wasn't one white on my sclera. It was all red. So, just red eyes.
It kind of sounds like Ebola almost. What would, I mean,
it was horrifying. When I see the pictures, I've only seen them a couple of times on purpose because it wrecks me. It brings me back to the place of being in the hospital. It's difficult to imagine. I mean, he was dead for all intents and purposes. If it weren't for the machines, he was dead.
Yeah, I asked my good family friend who actually was my mentor and got me into medical school. Much later, he actually was an attending at that hospital, at Hoag Hospital, had privileges there and would round on me. And so he was seeing this in real time. And much after this incident, I got together with him because you start to doubt things. You think maybe that didn't happen. Maybe it's exaggerated in my mind or something. And I sat down with dinner and I said, John, did I die? Did I almost die? And he's very understated. He always, brings it down 3 notches. And he said, that is as close to death as you can come. He said, you were, for all intents and purposes, dead.
Now you still bear that scar under your nose, but that's the
only thing. That's the scar of grace right there.
Yeah. But, tell people how you use that scar. Go ahead.
Yeah. So it's funny because I had a place where I had to have a dermatologist take a piece out for skin cancer. And I was taking a picture of it, and he's a great dermatologist in town here. And my smile was included in the picture that he asked me to send him. And he said, yeah, I can fix that, but I'll also fix your smile while I'm there.
Let me do a scar revision.
Yeah, let me do a scar revision. And, and I said, no, I'm going to keep it. It's the scar of grace to remind myself of his love and grace and tenderness in getting me through such an awful thing, to wake me up, to pay attention and, be obedient to his will. And, it's wonderful.
Before we finish this up with your marriage and then Luke coming and what you're doing now and what the lessons are, you began to have some doubts, Aja, though, after all this happened. Was this just an emotional conversion for me, or is it really true? Is that how you got involved in apologetics? What happened?
Exactly. You nailed it. So I had a crisis of faith immediately. We're talking probably same day, because here I had this experience. I had this experience with Jesus, the peace that surpasses all understanding, knowing that God had given the answer to what was killing Garrett. And yet it wasn't as if all of that erased my upbringing. It wasn't as if all of that had erased every doubt I had ever held for the last 27 years. And so I immediately said, okay, Lord, I've experienced you. Now I'm willing to learn about you. But is there any truth to these claims of Jesus being somebody that I should follow? And so that was where we dove together into apologetics, because coming from a background of needing to know the tangible science, that I need to be able to see it, touch it, smell it for it to be true, then apologetics just showed me, hey, look, there is a historical Jesus Christ. Here is the historical accuracy and reliability of him rising from the dead, which makes everything else possible. Well, start at the beginning of the Bible with God created everything. That's probably the top miracle, but then Jesus rising from the dead. But there's also these amazing truths that you can look at, like truth. There really is truth, or objective morality. There's an objective moral standard. If there's evil, then there's good. And where does good come from? So being able to have those answers was so much more intellectually stimulating, was so much more intellectually pleasing to me than before, when I just sat in this place of, well, there's no answers, so I'm not even going to ask the questions. And so it wasn't fast. It was years. I had to really slog through this, finding a connection between my brain and my heart, and then really learning to, okay, now I've really got my brain on board, but now I need to find relationship with Jesus, because that's probably the most important than anything. Apologetics strengthens my faith. To be certain, I am involved in some sort of apologetic study daily, but the relationship with Jesus Christ is what has been so life-changing.
Well, part of the evidence that he does exist is what you did indeed experience through all this.
Yeah.
It was God's providence where he got involved through other people, through the text, through the prayer, the prayer from that lady at the airport, the text from your jet ski buddy friend, your then persistence in running down there and saying, this is it, give him the antibiotic, do it, God was involved. And there's one other, I'm vaguely remembering something about the lady that sent the text using your thumb, Garrett. There's more to that story too. Can you tell that, Aja?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was exercising at this bar studio, and there was a gal that she looked like a Disney princess, and I just had this attraction to her. I wanted to be her friend. And so I kept feeling this nudge of, talk to her, be her friend. And so slowly we started this friendship. And after a few months of just, having small chat while we were working out side by side, I finally asked her what she did. And she said, I'm a nurse in the intensive care unit at Hoag Hospital. This was 3 years after his illness. And I said, oh, okay, well, you may have heard the story because it kind of got around. My husband is a psychiatrist, and he was in the ICU, almost died from this bacterial infection, leptospirosis. And as I'm explaining it to her, her face just dropped and her eyes welled with tears. And she said, Aja, I sent you and his mom a text message from the ER before we took him up to the ICU. And I said, what? And she said, yes, they didn't have a doctor who was on call at that moment. They were in between bringing in letting the old ER doc go and the new one come in. So I was the one who had to go down and do the transfer of care from ER to ICU. And I saw him struggling with what he was doing. So I got into his phone and sent those texts to you guys. And I just said, wow, Lord. So that explains why I was having this draw to this gal. Right. 3 years later. The Holy Spirit is just so cool in the way things are really woven together.
Yeah, we have all these effects in our lives, and we always reason back to a cause, and here's the cause, God working. Go ahead, Garrett, you're going to jump in.
Well, you used the right word, providence. Yeah. We see God's providence. There are so many lines of God interweaving this story. And the lie that the demons say is God doesn't exist, and certainly he doesn't love you. And that is an absolute life from the pit of hell. He loves you so much. And to follow up on the prognosis that she gave, she said, 1 month ICU, 3 month hospital, 1 year recovery. I was seeing patients remotely after 1 month, and I was back in the office almost full time, about 3/4 time in 3 months. And his providence was just all over our lives. He still works today.
When did you get married after this?
It took a year to get me.
That was November of 2013, and then we were married September of 2014.
Okay. And you were still in California at the time?
Yes, but got married in Hawaii.
Oh, you got married in Hawaii. Now you live in Hawaii.
Yeah.
And the doctors thought you were going to be dead. You were going to be dead. Obviously, here you are. And they probably said you'll never have children. What happened?
So when we got married, we said we are never having children. We had this common desire of no children.
Well, can I back up just one beat? After we got engaged in the hospital, we said, we're going to bring everything before the Lord.
Yeah, we truly pressed Control-Alt-Delete on our relationship. Yeah. It was a
clean
complete
swipe
refresh.
Yeah. And so we went forward in a new relationship with Christ at the center of our relationship, of a triple braided cord. And it was very different from then on. So sorry to interrupt.
No, not at all.
Yeah, go.
So we just didn't think that we wanted to have children. And I remember distinctly just before we got married, he said, "Hey, just so you know, I don't want to have kids." So, and I'm like, I don't want to have kids either. They would ruin our life. Well, I turned 30 and the Lord put this little tiny flicker in my heart. And then it grew and it grew and it grew. And you hear women talk about baby fever. Well, I had some serious baby fever. And every day I would pray for years, "Lord, change Garrett's heart. Lord, change Garrett's heart." And this is not an exaggeration, after years of this prayer, it's one of the few times where I feel like I had a near audible. I'm convicted of things all the time, but this was a heavy conviction where I just felt the Lord say to me, "You are being so selfish. Where am I in this prayer?" And so I said, "Wow, Lord, you are correct. Your will be done on our lives, but whatever it is, please just give me peace." Because I was hurting during this time. I would talk to this poor guy multiple times a day, every day. "Let's have a baby. Let's have a baby." Mm-hmm. So I changed my prayer up.
Well, you came to me and you said, "What do you pray for?" After that conviction. And I said, "I pray that the Lord will do what he will do to further our sanctification." Mm-hmm. Whatever that is.
Being on the mission field or having a child or whatever.
We thought we were going to go on an international mission assignment as missionaries. And
well, a 2-year-old will certainly increase your sanctification.
Oh, boy. So after I switched my prayer up, just within 3 months, I was miraculously pregnant. I won't get into the details, but there was no reason why I should have got pregnant. And not only did I get pregnant, but the Lord, again, it was one of those nearly audibles where I just knew that not only was I pregnant, but I knew that we were having a boy. And so
that was true. Yeah.
That was also a huge turning point in my walk with the Lord, which has only been 3 years. So there is this process. I think often people think that it's just, I became a Christian and now everything has fallen into place. As Christians, we can ask questions and we can have doubts and we can share in community with other believers and walk in a way that really lifts each other up. And that was another one of my turning points, is becoming learning the goodness of God, learning that his will is so much better than anything we could ever ask or imagine. And that was really another turning point, I think, not to mention the fact that just the simple act of being a parent can refine you by fire.
I totally agree. We knew in the hospital in real time, God was at work, and same, he changed my heart, and I was super excited to be Luke's dad. It just, we knew that, here he goes again. He's moving so prominently in our lives. And yeah.
Well, it's such a great story. In fact, Animal Planet did a special on it years ago. This happened in 2013. You don't want to see it anymore, Aja. But anyway, it's called Monsters in Me, right? That's what the
Monsters Inside Me.
Monsters Inside Me. Yeah.
Season 6, episode 6. You have to pay $1.99 on Amazon, I think, to rent it.
So yeah, you can look that up, friends. But let's bring it to a close by saying, what would you like our viewers and listeners to take away from this whole story? I'll start with you, Aja, and then we'll go to Garrett.
My goodness. Just the goodness of God. And I know if you are in a position of atheism and or just extreme ambivalence, it's hard to hear that. But on this side, knowing Jesus and walking with Jesus, there's nothing like it. There is joy upon joy in walking with the Lord. And I know that I have unbelieving family and friends that will hear this. And so my prayer, my hope in hearing our story and getting to understand the way that the Lord has moved through our life with growth and conviction and being the people that we are, all is possible through Christ alone. He is real. There's lots of proof. There's lots of, go watch Dr. Frank's many videos of things that will help you know and understand that Jesus is King.
Garrett?
The world will tell you, put your trust in reason, or put your trust in what you feel. And God is extending an invitation to all through his son, Jesus Christ, that every day you can put your hope and faith in Jesus Christ and repent and be forgiven. And it is a wild ride. Get to know the basic instructions before leaving Earth. The Bible, his love letter to humanity. Fill your life with people who follow him to the exclusion of toxic people. Draw that boundary very, very sharply and distinctly. And, follow the Spirit. If you're not making disciples or seeing joy, love, peace, patience, goodness, gentleness, kindness, faithfulness, self-control in your life, get with someone that is, and be a student of Jesus and make other students of Jesus.
Amen to that. You're the kind of psychiatrist people should want to see because you have the right worldview. What's your website? If people do want to get a hold of you, where do they go, Garrett?
So the website is, I think, braindochawaii.com. Yeah. And
braindochawaii.com.
Yes.
Okay, we'll put that in the show notes. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we have fun. It's a playground of apologetics every day because someone will come in with some metaphysical crisis, some crisis in their life, and we get the privilege of working through that with them. And ultimately, the answer to every question is Jesus. And so we get to arrive at that. Obviously, our aim is to first provide the highest level of psychiatric care, brain balancing through neurochemistry. But we consider the whole person, your body, mind, and spirit. Your body and brain is what you eat. Your mind is what you pay attention to, and your spirit is who you worship. And those, we are a soul spirit incarnated in a body.
Well said. And go to that website, ladies and gentlemen, if you want more. You'll see on their website 1 Corinthians 15, verses 3 to 11, which includes the great creed. So Garrett and Aja are right up front with their Christianity. People know what they're getting when they walk in. And that's why a lot of people who go there get cured, actually. Too often, if you have the wrong worldview and you try and cure somebody with the wrong worldview, you're not going to get a cure, are you? You're only going to get a cure when you use the right tools and the right worldview. Well, it's been such a pleasure, Garrett and Aja. Thanks for sharing the story.
Thank you for having us. Thank you for asking the questions.
Oh,
Thank you for your ministry.
As soon as you told me the story, I'm like, people need to know more about this. This is absolutely amazing, and it is. So keep doing.
Well, we're honored to be able to share on your platform. So thank you.
Oh, I'm honored to have you guys on. So thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, don't forget to check them out in the show notes. We'll have all the links there, and tell other people about this podcast, even people who are not Christians, because this story needs to be heard. All right. It's been great being with you. See you here next time. God bless.
If you're looking for solid answers to life's biggest questions, don't miss the latest episode of I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. Find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, iHeart, OnePlace, and Podchaser. Tune in, discover the truth, and share it with someone who needs it. Let's keep spreading the truth together.